welcome you all to the World Women Future Forum United Nations General Assembly 77 agenda. We are here today to reimagine an equal future for women and girls everywhere. That is the topic of the conversation. That is what we are here. We're going to have a lot of really fruitful discussions and sharing of bold ideas on how we go about just doing that. And guided by our mission, which is to inspire, educate, and really provide 1 million female heroes by 2030, we're going to do just that here today and reimagine what that equal future looks like for them. A bold new way to accelerate women in leadership roles that is about dignity, equality, and confidence. And we're committed to scaling and accelerating the impact of 1 million women and girls by 2030. And we do that providing the long-term investments that they need, the tools and the resources to uplevel their skills, giving them the capacity, the connections, and the visibility that they need to succeed and pursue their passions in their career.
Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you, Krystina. So over the last 5 years, we have built a network of 300 change makers and 55,000 global mentorship program graduates from 20 countries who are solving some of the world's greatest challenges. And we aim to elevate 2 million women's socioeconomic milieu by providing capital, coaching, and community in STEAM fields. We can do more by working creatively and collaboratively for an equitable future. And I personally believe that creativity is a human skill that exists in every single person. And together, we can use creativity as our vehicle to drive change.
As board members with the World Women Foundation, we are going to continue to be committed to investing and inspiring these future female leaders all around the world. And so thank you again for joining us. And speaking of inspiring and inspiration, we wouldn't be here today without my female hero and mentor that is at the heightened priority of women and girls and a key change maker in the field, Rupa Dash, the co-founder and CEO of World Women Foundation.
Good morning. Good morning, New York. We need some energy in this room. And can we make some noise? You can imagine I'm from India. I love noise. So, first of all, thank you for coming here for reimagining an equal future for women and girls in a bold new way. And there can't be a better time to reimagine that during the United Nations General Assembly. The bold new way, why I say that? Because a conscious evolution is happening in our generation. And we are kind of gaining an understanding how the choices that we make and how the nature responds, how the society responds, and how it shapes our world at large. And with that increased knowledge, either we can destroy this beautiful planet, or we can reshape and can reimagine an equal future. And this is something, these are not my words, these are inspiration that I've drawn from one of the most iconic mentors I have the good fortune of spending time with. Her name is Dr. Barbara Hubbard, one of the most iconic futuristic women that I have ever had the fortune of spending time with her. And she would often say that we are at a risk that is coming so fast, it's unimaginable, faster than even we can think. And as the Global Risk Report even validates that. The pandemic, the climate change, the religious intolerance, how it has affected us in the last 100 years. And why do we care about it now? Because there is so much at stake and so little has been done. And we cannot wait any longer. With globalization 4.0, 160 million women might have to change their occupation. And the global crisis, like the climate change, will have a harder impact on women's health, education, and economic empowerment. And the technology, as it advances, it will also leave millions of women behind because of the digital divide. The risk of changing is so fast, it's unimaginable. And I can truly speak to that. Working in many developing parts of the world, we see it firsthand. But women are on the forefront of tackling these challenges. We are the most powerful agents of change. And women, we make it happen. That's why we are just here right now. And the time is to achieve now. We can protect our planet. We can protect our women and children. The economy can see its full potential. A people-centered economy is possible, and a equal future for women and girls is absolutely possible. And of course, this wouldn't have been possible without the support of futuristic organizations who really back this idea of putting women's agenda first, putting women's issues first, and also thinking women as the future who are taking the challenge and solving the problems. And that's why I would like to especially thank Keynote for leading the movement to create better health for women, BMW for reimagining the future and pushing the women's agenda forward, Schneider Electric for reimagining how we can provide equal access to energy for women and girls around the world, and of course Microsoft always supporting the world with technology and supporting women and girls. Thank you. Day, but we just gave a few minutes for people to arrive. But at this time, I would like to welcome Rachel J. Thomas, the senior advisor to and also at the Office of Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security. There can't be a better way to start with a big mission. How can we have a peaceful world for women and girls? Rachel.
Thank you so much, Rupa. I was just telling my colleague over here, it's so great to see different colors in the room, both racially, ethnically, but also just in fashion. In DC, we have a tendency to wear a lot of black, and the idea of power suits and color blocking has yet to reach the State Department, with a few save Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins and Ambassador Gina Abercrombie Winstanley, who always matches her lipstick with her shoes and her outfit, and it is amazing. So with that, as Rupa said, my name is Rachel Thomas. I am the Senior Advisor on Women, Peace, and Security, as well as Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility for Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins, who is the Undersecretary of Arms Control and International Security at the U.S. Department of State. It is amazing to be up here for the 77 UNGA. I'm extremely honored to be even asked to open for this amazing event full of experts and change makers and just people who are really looking forward to reimagining the future. For most of my time in the US Navy, and as a military detailee at the Department of State in the Office of Global Women's Issues, I served in what is commonly known as hard security. So weapons, military strength, policies geared towards the preventing the spread of weapons of mass destruction. This field is one that, as I'm sure you're aware, is not necessarily known for gender equity or inclusivity. At one point, the idea of having someone like myself who focuses directly on inclusion and gender equity would have been deemed frivolous or unnecessary. I can tell you in the 10 years in the military, talking about women, peace, and security has been one of those brush-off points, one that is hard to have gotten leaders to understand, but it's changing slowly. I am honored now to be able to work in this field, which does, thank you to Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins, encompass all my intersecting identities. Being a Black woman, a female veteran, queer. The recognition is growing, as Rupa said, that we as nations, businesses, communities, and individuals must commit to ensuring that women and gender diverse people not only have a seat at the table, but also a voice as well. For too long, we have been left out of these discussions that have directly impacted our lives and our futures. We are faced with 21st century challenges, and it's time for 21st century solutions. I'm proud to be working with the Biden administration because they have publicly and vocally emphasized this commitment to inclusivity, especially during the General Assembly. I'm also particularly proud of the administration for the vision of nominating a woman of color to lead the department's work on hard security, especially on nuclear non-proliferation, weapons of mass destruction, biological weapons, chemical weapons, things of that nature that even a couple of years ago may have seemed unattainable. I would also like to highlight that Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins is the first African-American woman to be nominated in this position. And as she likes to say, it is 2022. This is high time that this has happened. In this role, she's definitely illustrated by her words and her deeds that women in leadership positions have responsibility to give back and not pull up the ladder behind us, to ensure that every day diversity is fundamental and shown and represented within the workplace. The world is facing a global security crisis with multiple causes: climate change, food security, infectious diseases, armed conflicts, and new and rising concerns. When we examine the complex issues involved in disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control, it's increasingly clear the challenges we face are more complex and wide-reaching than they've ever been before. Newer areas of security, especially in the technology fora, are emerging, such as AI, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, quantum computing, and peaceful applications of nuclear technology for civilians to use. With these amazing advances, unfortunately, also comes risks of negative, unintentional, and intentional impacts. Thousands of documents, of hours of discussions, of case studies have shown what a lot of us in this room already know. Women, girls, and gender diverse persons are the ones that are most affected by many of these issues. But at the same time, because of our experiences, we are best placed to uniquely contribute to find the solutions to these drivers of instability. Yet we're still left out of these discussions. For us to improve gender equity in international and security affairs, those who benefit from the current system must understand this system does not benefit all, and it never will until the views of all segments of society are heard. How are we able to find stable and long-lasting solutions if we can't analyze and look at the full picture and consider those whose human rights are most impacted? This is what we are working to at the State Department, and myself included, striving every day in everything that I do to ensure that everyone, no matter their gender, orientation, ethnicity, religion, or identity, can be heard and their views taken into account so that we all may thrive. Since 2009, the State Department has committed resources to ensuring national key priority policies fully integrate the rights of women and girls, and more recently, gender diverse persons, into the formulation and conduct of all U.S. foreign policy, putting the United States in the forefront of advancing gender equity around the world. For example, our Bureau of Political Military Affairs, also known as PM, manages what's known as the Global Peace Operations Initiative, also known as GPOI. As you can tell, we love acronyms, even if we cannot remember what some of them stand for at times. GPOI encourages women's participation and leadership in peace operations, trains female peacekeepers, and integrates gender-related topics such as preventing gender-based violence into training for all peacekeepers around the world. Through these efforts and more women are taking part into the solutions to these global issues and not just being left behind at the sidelines. This past week, and I'm still getting over the jet lag, I traveled with Ambassador Jenkins to Vietnam and Singapore. One of the most touching experiences that I had was in Vietnam when we went to the Quang Tri province, and we got to speak with an all-female team who works in the removal of unexploded ordnance. So removal of landmines, claymores, things left behind from the Vietnam War. As we spoke to them, it was amazing to listen to the different reasons that they had. One of the women described it. She was excited at being able to turn the sound of explosions from one of terror to one of happiness, as her community knew these controlled explosions of ordnance meant safety and security and opening up agriculture for her family and her community. Vietnam is not the only place where women are taking on a leading role like this. Since 2014, we've done funded and managed programs where women have been deminers or been doing mine risk education in Tajikistan, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, as well as funding 8 female Yazidi clearance teams in Sinjar, northern Iraq. Internally as well, I will say the US government is not easy. This work is not easy at all, trying to get past the hierarchicalness of the government. But we have just recently started to not only examine the barriers to discrimination for those who have been historically marginalized, but we have started to take action. At the State Department, our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, led by the amazing Ambassador Abercrombie Winstanley, set up working groups to assess challenges to retention, recruitment, and the barriers that are preventing us from having a truly diverse workforce. We are using these results to work towards institutionalizing fair and equal participation to build us into our policies and procedures. We're also working to elevate our colleagues and our peers. I consider Ambassador Jenkins a pivotal role model for myself, and I would like to share some of the valuable pieces of advice she shared with me and her other mentees that have helped us to where we are today. Maintain your support system. We need at least 3 things to thrive professionally. Trusted mentors for expertise to help us chart our paths. Colleagues and trusted subordinates with whom we can exchange ideas and encouragement and turn to when we need help. And true friends, ideally outside your immediate work community, but it's different times now, to anchor you and to relieve stress. Passion is important, but do not become so passionate about your work that you forget to cultivate this strategy, which is useful both for career advancement and self-care. Work both inside and outside of government. The US system of government and education allows talented individuals to regularly move between the federal government, think tanks, Congress, nonprofits, all of these different things. Depending on what country you're from, the mechanics may vary, but this is an excellent way to build competence, self-reliance, and ability to transition seamlessly between jobs, which I will say, having the adaptation and flexibility in the government is key because things just turn on a dime and you don't know where they're going next. We all have our reasons for doing the work that we do, and we all have different passions and desires that drive us. For the woman in Vietnam, it was creating hope in her community and reimagining what the future may look like for her community and family. For me, it's knowing that my contributions can help pave the way for others, and that I can represent what it's like to be out and proud as a veteran and in the US government. My advice to you all is to look inward and understand what drives you. That knowledge will become the anchor that you can grasp when the seas are rough. As Rupa said, the future begins here and now. The choices that we make today will ripple through time. We must think and identify new and innovative ways to tackle the issues that we've mentioned, from emerging tech and clean energy to healthcare and climate change. Those of you here today and anyone watching has unique and necessary perspectives that can change the path of the future if only we dare to dream of it. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best in everything that you do.
And a very impressive resume. Thank you so much. Daniel Seymour, the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the UN Women Division, sent a beautiful note. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it here today, but he sends his regards, and we, of course, are going to continue to move forward to have some additional powerful discussions on how we can continue to create change. Our first panel that we have here today is Organon, a company that is healthcare for her and committed and dedicated to that. I had a pleasure of hearing some of Geraldine's stories, and I look forward to having her come on the panel. And moderating that today is going to be Lori Edelman, who is the Vice President, Influence and Engagement of the Global Fund for Women. So they're going to be talking about removing barriers to contraception so all women and girls can achieve their promise. So without further ado.
Hello, my name is Dan Seymour. I'm the Director for Partnerships at UN Women, the United Nations entity for gender equality and the empowerment of women. I'm very sorry I can't be with you today. The General Assembly Week, unfortunately, generates a lot of competing priorities. I would very much have liked to be with you. It's a very exciting event, and I'm sorry to miss it, but I did want to offer a few words of framing, maybe as a contribution to your discussion, and what I'm sure will be a very rich event. Around about this time, some 7 years ago, the world and the General Assembly were coming to the end of the Millennium Development Goals and thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals that would succeed them. The Millennium Development Goals had indeed had a goal around gender equality, but it was expressed quite narrowly in terms of girls' education and not a lot else. And it is, I think, reflective of an understanding that we have now that the Sustainable Development Goals in SDG 5 looked at gender equality in a much broader way. If you look at, as I'm sure many of you will know, the goals and the targets, SDG 5 looks at gender equality in a very holistic way, talking about the laws that we have in place, the discriminatory ones we need to end, the positive ones we need to ensure are there, addressing violence against women, looking at harmful traditional practices like early marriage, the value and the sharing of the burden of care work for children and the elderly and so on, the value and importance of women's leadership, women's access to sexual and reproductive health services, economic equality, and access to technology. So really, SDG 5, that we're coming close to the midpoint of that 2030 agenda timeframe, gives us a blueprint or a roadmap for a vision of gender equality that is quite thorough. Given that, it is very disappointing, and you'll see in the latest gender snapshot from the United Nations that the UN Department for Economic, Social Affairs and UN Women together lead on, paints quite a dismal picture in terms of progress towards SDG 5, and in large part driven by many of the setbacks that came from COVID. We know that during COVID, partly as a consequence of women being locked in with their abusers, demand for response services increased somewhere in the region of 500%. We know that as of the middle of 2022, there were almost 20 million fewer paid jobs for women globally than there had been in March 2020. And that's pretty much double the reduction that you see for men. We know that some 64 million women dropped out of the labour market due to mounting care responsibilities, and also because they had the more insecure and informal jobs that were hit hardest. And just in general, the gender poverty gap, which has always been stubborn and problematic, is actually going to grow this year to almost 400 million women living in extreme poverty. So by varying estimates, this has set us back a generation in the pursuit of gender equality. By various estimates, the achievement of the vision of equality on current trajectory that we see in SDG 5 will take some 300 years. And the picture is even more problematic in a sense because so many of the challenges that face the world right now, around COVID, around climate, and conflict are in practice heavily gendered in the sense that the impacts on women tend to be disproportionately heavy in different circumstances. Now, I don't want to give the impression that this is all about the negatives. There is an enormous gender dividend that we have the opportunity to leverage at this point in time. McKinsey and others have made various estimates of the potential boosts to global GDP of achieving equality in the economic sphere. 28 trillion by one estimate, which is no small amount. But it's very, very clear if we could bring women's potential and capacity and contribution properly into the market, there would be a benefit to all of us. And in the area of leadership, as many of you will, or maybe all of you will be aware, as the world has navigated COVID, in general, you were better off living in a country led by a woman than a country led by a man. Women's leadership during COVID was very, very clear, and it reiterated the power of bringing women's leadership into the political space and the benefits of that. So, okay, fine. Then so what do we do about that? I want to offer a couple of lenses on that. First, some sort of priority actions that we can think about how we collaborate. And then I want to say a little bit about what that means in terms of how we do things from the positions where we sit. But let me start with just a couple of issues. First of all, I think we have to, and as UN Women, we very much focus on the need to prioritize women's access to decent work, to social protection, particularly in higher paying STEM and green sector jobs, bringing women into leadership and decision-making positions across the world of work as well as the political sphere. I think it's no coincidence that the team that developed the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine for COVID was 2/3 female. You don't have to look very far to see quite how much innovation and progress has been driven through teams with heavy female involvement, and how much we would have missed out on without that. Secondly, we really need to prioritize care. We need to acknowledge the value of domestic work that is disproportionately done by women across the world, the developing and the developed world alike, and to find better support for people with care responsibilities, both in terms of government policy, but also in terms of private sector practice, if we want to have that more integrated, resilient economy. And that means supporting women and men employees through flexible working arrangements, affordable care services, equal parental leave, and other measures. But I want to just finish off by asking a question. You know, all of us here, I assume, work in institutions, and we all have, to varying degrees, positions of authority and decision making within those institutions. So, from where we sit, what can we do if we want where we work and the place where we make our contribution deliver the best it can on this gender equality agenda? And I would suggest 4 things that we can do, 4 things that you would expect to see in any institution of any kind that is serious about making its best contribution to that agenda. The first is a clear and visible, articulated internally and externally commitment to gender equality. In the case of the private sector, for example, the women's empowerment principles are a very clear and effective agenda to make that commitment publicly. Nearly 7,000 CEOs in 153 countries have done exactly that. And we find that companies that do that tend to be doing better on gender equality than companies that don't. So the first is that commitment. Second is to ensure that there is the capacity within a company or an institution to deliver on the agenda, that the training, the systems in place, the procedures, the rules, the HR rules, whatever they might be, to ensure that is delivered on. The third is around the cash and the resources that we allocate, because so much of the reality of what our institutions do is related to the way that they use their financing, and that includes reducing the gender pay gap, resourcing, diversity, equity, inclusion, functions and capacities within institutions, but making sure that that is not an unfunded mandate of the institution. And lastly, in some ways I think perhaps most importantly, ensuring accountability. And that means being clear on the performance indicators against which you assess your institution's achievements or otherwise with regard to gender equality, making those public, and also reporting publicly so that you're held to account. Because I think we all know that the things that we really care about in our institutions are precisely those things we measure, precisely those things we tell the world we want to achieve and that we expect to be judged by. And I personally believe that given the importance of this agenda, that I think we all recognize, and the commitment that we all share to doing something, and the potential dividends of doing it, the urgency and the calamitous implications of not doing it, that those 4 steps of making the commitment, of ensuring the capacity is there, of identifying the resources, and genuinely being accountable can deliver real change, real impact, and progress against an agenda which is crucial not just for women and girls, but for all of us. That's very much the vision of UN Women, the United Nations as a whole, but I think that whole global community and constituency for equality that I know all of us consider ourselves and are proud to be a part of. So again, I'm very sorry I can't be with you in person for this discussion, but I really wish you all the best for this event, and I'm very much going to look forward to hearing about the outcomes from today. So again, thank you very, very much.